there's a lot of people who think in order for me to scale, this is really true of small business owners. In order for me to scale, what I need to do is replicate myself. If there were more of me's, I would be successful. That is never true. I've
Oh,
not
wow.
found that to be true even once.
Welcome back to Stack to Scale, the show where we dive into what it really takes to grow modern, mission-driven businesses. Today, I'm excited to introduce Jay Sherer, an award-winning storyteller, marketer, and fractional CMO who's helping brands punch above their weight with strategic storytelling and sharp go-to-market strategies. Jay wears a lot of hats, and I can tell you from working with him for years, he wears them really well. So as the founder of Reclamation Society, he's written and produced multiple award-winning narrative films and podcasts that blend deep human themes with cinematic storytelling. That same creative vision really is what powers his work as a fractional CMO, where he helps startups scale companies and craft their brand narrative as they're building and growing sustainably, all without the overhead of a full-time exec. Jay's marketing experience and his leadership, I would say is not just creative, it's effective. He's helped early stage companies clarify their positioning, accelerate their traction, and connect with audiences in competitive markets. And also, we've seen along the way, he's racked up multiple awards for storytelling and content production that span film, podcasting, and branded content. Jay, it's just awesome, man, and love to hear more about that. So in this episode, we're going to talk with Jay Sherer about how he blends storytelling with strategy as he's growing both startups and mid-market companies through his fractional CMO business. So Jay, welcome to Stack to Scale. We've got Tom here, Tom Tonkin, our co-host. We're going to jump into it, ask some really fun questions about how we help these businesses grow.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I always love working with Ninestone. And, when you're going to scale, who you partner with matters. Because you can't just partner with anybody. So I'm glad that I'm talking to you guys. Always a pleasure. And thanks for having me on the show.
We are excited, Jay. We got a whole bunch of questions for you. And of course, our audience will get a lot of benefit from it. So if it's okay with everybody, I want to dive right in and get the first one off the ground. So Jay, I want you to think about either your own business or another business. When do you realize that a particular business needs to scale? Do you have are there signals or pain points that push that decision?
This is a question that I help a lot of businesses try and solve, especially in the startup marketplace. There's a lot of books that have come out about this problem because it is a distinct problem that exists, right? So what is the problem? The problem is, if I just have an idea, guess what I can't do? I can't just go start marketing the idea, right? Like I have to figure out if the idea is viable. I have to figure out if the idea is profitable. There's a lot of companies that have a really cool idea. They come up with pricing. They test their pricing model. Then they release it to the public and don't realize that it costs them more money to deliver that product than they make in revenue. So it's actually a money-losing ordeal. So the question of when to scale is actually probably one of the most difficult to answer. So let me just tell you about what I do to help someone answer that question.
That'd be great.
I'm a really big believer in Steve Blank. I keep 4 Steps to the Epiphany on my desk at all times. And it's something that I highly recommend that people read. The only problem with 4 Steps to the Epiphany, because Steve Blank is a startup genius, the only problem with it is that it reads very much like a textbook. And so one of the things that I'll tell people is I say, you can just go buy this book. You don't have to hire me. I don't have to help you with customer development, but this is what it is. And this is why it's awesome. And then they read the book and they go, okay, cool, Jay, can you do this for us? Because I don't know how to do it. And it's basically a 4-step process. Sounds easy, not that easy to do. About how do I validate my idea, validate that I have customers who want my idea, find product market fit, and then build a sales process and a company around this idea. And most people don't do that. Most people go, I have a brilliant idea. Most people must want this. I'm going to put together a marketing team. I'm going to start a company. We're going to start doing things. And you put the cart before the horse, and pretty soon you realize, wait, how come no one wants my product? How come I can't find the marketplace for my product? How come none of these things work? And there's a lot of promises out there that it's kind of like, yeah, well, don't worry, AI will find your marketplace for you, or it's easy to find your marketplace marketplace.
Right.
But Tom and I know, because Tom and I were helping the same customer not too long ago, because I partner with Ninestone a lot. Sometimes it's very difficult to find the right product market fit. And if you have not done that, you will waste a lot of time and a lot of money and make a lot of your investors very upset with you that you haven't done that before you start spending money. And so don't spend bad money thinking that you have nailed something that you think is scalable when it is way too early to scale that thing.
So what would you say, Jay, like if you were to say specific signals that go, oh, we've got something scalable here? What are just a couple of those that you're finding? And Tom, because we're working on similar types of projects all together, what would you say too?
Yeah, so here's some hallmarks, right? The first thing that you have to find is that you have to find people who are not just telling you have a good idea. This is the number one mistake that a lot of people early on make, is that they think, oh, I've had a dozen people tell me that I have a really good idea. That does not mean any of those people are going to purchase what you're actually selling. So the first thing to do is to clarify and to validate, are these people just telling me that I have a good idea, or are these people beating down my door to say, please create that tomorrow, because I'm going to give you $100 now and you tell me when the product is ready and we're good to go. Like I'm on board. And that's one of the biggest problems. And even this book breaks it down into like what does someone look like who is likely to buy from you versus someone who's just telling you, oh, I like this idea and I have this problem, but I don't really want to spend that kind of money to solve it. So all of a sudden, the customer you thought you had, you don't actually have. So the hallmarks are so things like they have actually budgeted for it. They've put together their own solution. They've cobbled together their own solution out of a set of like disparate parts that are like, well, I use these 5 systems, and it takes me forever, but I have to, because there's no other way for me to get what I want. And then I come in and say, okay, I can take all those systems, turn it into one system. And by the way, I'll reduce your time spent on all this stuff by 90%, and I'll actually reduce your cost by $100. Well, that's a no-brainer. I'm signing up tomorrow, right?
Right.
So those are the kind of things you want to hear from people. You want to hear that it's not just a hypothetical solution. It is a concrete, I want it tomorrow. When can I buy it? That's when you get to the place where you're like, okay, I know I can scale this. If it's still theoretical, if it's still like, I like what you're saying, I really appreciate that you're trying to do this for people, that's not enough. It's not going to get you to the point where you can go, yes, let's scale this tomorrow.
Yeah. What do you say, Tom?
Well, I mean, I happen to agree. And I think the other bridge that we often traverse is when we're talking to the business owner or the thought leader of that particular widget. Let's face it, they're enamored with their thing. And it blinds them to all of this. And I think that's a real challenge for us that are even trying to help those, as well as for the business owner, entrepreneur, innovator person to let go. And you almost don't want to let them go because you want them to be passionate about it and solve the problem. But then reality sets in. And so I think there is it's interesting. Alex, you and I work with value builder people, and we know that there's statistics when somebody exits that 75% of those owners, when they exit.
Yeah, it's right in there.
Right. They, after a year, actually regret selling their business.
Yeah, within a year. Within a year,
right? And mostly it's because they've got their identity wrapped up into that particular widget. So it's a lot deeper than just a set of spreadsheets that look like a good idea, right? There's an emotional attachment to some of that. And I think if that resonates with our listeners or with those that are working with those kind of people, I wouldn't shortchange that aspect of it.
Yeah, I would double down on that and I totally agree. There is this is especially true in the startup world for people who just like to build right? There are people who just like to build. And a person who likes to build is oftentimes not a person who likes to think about the financial side of building. They just want to build, right? And by the way, that comes from a very altruistic place because I just want to build the best product for my audience that I'm trying to help out. A lot of times when I step into a company, especially if they've been doing customer development incorrectly for a longer period of time, one of the things I have to convince them of is like, you need to stop building and you need to start thinking, how do I sell a product? Those are not the same things. Because I can sell a product tomorrow having built very little. Right.
Right.
Like there are times when I'll tell people like, hey, you say you need a website. I'm telling you right now, all you need is email exchanges. You don't need a website. Like you can send email to person 1 and say, do you want to buy this thing? You can email to person 2 and say, do you want to sell this thing? And you can connect those people and you're the middle person, you make money. You can sell that tomorrow. You don't need an app to do that for you, right? An app makes it more efficient, makes it more scalable. But the problem is that if you focus on the wrong things, you will get the wrong answers. If you focus on just building, you will continue to build. If you focus on trying to make money, you will actually start to be able to start creating a company. And those are two very different things. So I totally double down on what Tom said.
I call that professional procrastination. Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right. The website, the app, the widget that I need before I could actually do any work. And so a lot of people just, it's a nice little buffer to wrap their head around something like that, as opposed to go out and getting their hands dirty.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I had some mentors of mine say, the first question they asked me when I started Ninestone is, well, can you sell it? And I was like, well, I'm not sure. They're like, well, why don't you go get some contracts and then you have a company? It's like, just go sell the thing and then you could build scalable processes to deliver the thing. Now that's kind of like the flying, building the plane as it's in the air. But I think there is something to this idea that do you have something you could sell and do people want it? Like you said, Jay?
Yeah. Well, in a real life example of this, I'll give you a real life example real quick. I know we have more questions to get to, but real quick, I came on board with a client who had been building their product for a long period of time, had read the 4 Steps to the Epiphany book, was trying to figure out how to sell this thing, had really generous donors for a really long period of time, and really cool people, amazing people to work with. But they're kind of like, hey, look, it's been years. And the funders aren't going to keep funding us for more and more and more years. So like, what's wrong with what we're doing? And what it turned out is that it was like, well, you're not talking to people. You're not going out and interviewing people and asking them what it is that they need. And then I actually got them to the place where I was saying, look, you need to pick a person you're building the product for and start building it for them. And they did that, and they added a whole new feature set because they're like, oh, our product doesn't work for these people without these features. And I said, great. Now, you got to be, as I say that, you do have to be careful of feature creep, where it's like, oh, I need another feature before I can sell it. And you be careful about that. But also it enabled them to go, okay, wait a minute, who am I actually selling this product to? And it changed their idea of who their customer was. They kind of had a thought process for who their customer was. It was actually incorrect. They had a different customer, and this customer was never going to buy it the way that they needed to. This customer is perfect for them. That took them to a place where they started building the product for the correct person, and then got contracts that are hopefully closing by the end of the year. So it's just transformative if you say, like, I'm actually building it for these people so that they will pay me money, is a very different thing than I'm building it because I want it to be cool. Very different conclusion.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Right? You want it to be cool, though, but you also want someone to be willing to
both
use it,
and, yeah.
So walk me through the very first time, Jay, or that you really scaled an initiative, or maybe not the first time, but because you've done a lot of these things, but a recent situation where you've had a scaling kind of initiative for a company, and what did it look like operationally, and how did you measure the early success or failure?
Oh man, this is a really good question, but it can go in so many different directions. Yeah, I mean, like, so there's like, you can scale initiatives. Ninestone and I have done that together before. We were one of my favorite examples actually was that Alex and I were working with a small segment of an educational institution, and they were COVID had put them far behind what they had told their grant funding company they were going to achieve. So they got a grant because they said they were going to achieve specific things. They were at risk of losing that grant because COVID had prevented them from doing a lot of what they were trying to intend to do. And they were basically like, we have to scale this up in like a number of months, basically, because if
4
we
months.
don't, it was crazy. Because if we don't, the grant company will say you don't get another round because you failed in your first iteration of this, right? And so Alex and I sat down with them and we actually started asking them very basic questions of like, okay, well, what does it look like for a student to want to participate in this? Why would a student not participate? Why would a student participate? What type of students have you seen participate this way in the past? And then building a specific strategy around like, okay, students are a very unique type of audience. And so if you think of students, students face far more noise than most customers that you will ever be encountering, right? Especially for programs that they don't absolutely have to participate in. They're not required to. So you can imagine they're just receiving noise from every single thing, telling them they need to do something different, they need to act different, they need to get their lives together differently. It builds up anxiety in them. And so it's like, how can you get this population that's kind of like, I want to turn off what I can turn off so that I don't have all of this noise in my mind? How can I break through that as a program that will actually be beneficial to them and actually scale it? So in other words, the lift is heavy for a marketing department to kind of try and figure out in that limited kind of time frame. But what I would do is I would sit with them and I would say, like, we need to figure out how can we go back to people who have expressed interest before? How can we find more people like them? How can we get them to refer others to your program? How can we actually make it easier? One of the best ways of when you deal with people is, and this is true of sales, this is true of students on campus, but I can shorten the life cycle stage or the buying cycle stage or the participation stage if I can meet you in person. Because I remove barriers, right? I can take several more steps if I meet with you in person than if I'm just sending you email trying to get you to click through to a website. If I can somehow subvert that process and get you to talk to a human, now I've made a connection, and that connection allows me to answer questions quicker, tell them about what the next step would be, all of those things. So each company is going to scale differently. This is why it's a little bit difficult to give like an example that's like, oh yeah, just do this and it works for any kind of situation. Each company is going to scale very differently, but the core of scaling is that you need to really understand three things before you can scale. What we just talked about with the 4 steps to the epiphany was understanding the customer. That's one part of that equation, right? But you need to understand three things. One is, what is my customer needs? The other is, what is the competition doing? So when you think about it in the student context, I can go play basketball. I have to go to classes. I have to work on my papers. I have to do all this competition for your attention. So if the competition is doing these things, what do I need to do to make the person that I'm trying to attract say, oh, I'd rather do that than these other things? Or it's more beneficial for me to do that than it is for me to do these other things. Again, heavy lift, but that's on us to try and figure out how to do, right? Understand your customer, understand what the competitors are telling them and what the competitors are doing with them, and then understand where the marketplace trend is headed as well. There are some times when businesses will come and they'll be like, hey, look, we want to scale this thing. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but the marketplace is not going in that direction at all. There may be no scaling for you, because if you came to me today and said, like, what's a good example of this? Probably. I'll give you a good example from my other area of the world that I participate in filmmaking. If you came to me today and said, I really want to scale in-person movie theaters, I'd be like, man, the marketplace is not headed in that direction, right? Like, but
My
if you
kids
said
are
to me,
like,
hey,
what? I don't go to the movie theaters anymore. I eat my popcorn at home.
yeah, now this is a fun challenge though, because I think we could scale the in-person theater, but how would we have to do it? We'd have to come up with some other experience. What is the competition doing? Well, you just said it. I can eat my popcorn at home. I can pause it. I can turn on subtitles. Okay, well, what's an experience? I was telling my friends this the other day. I want to see movies in IMAX. Because guess what? I have a really nice big TV. I have a decent sound bar, but I can't get IMAX at home. So if I'm seeing the latest Avengers movie or something, I'm going to go to the theater and see it on IMAX, right? So again, how do we scale? Well, we have to be very strategic in understanding what does the customer need, what is the competition doing, and how is the marketplace changing and shifting around us. Once we understand those three factors, then we can kind of go after and scale something. It's going to be different in every single context, but you know that what you're going to need is you're going to need really strong marketing. If you're a B2B business, you're going to need really strong sales, because Alex and I can drive a bunch of stuff into the pipeline. But if Tom doesn't know how to sell, which Tom does know how to sell, just FYI, but if
Yeah.
Tom doesn't know how to sell, then guess what? We get nothing out of that, right? So you have to have a strong marketing, you have to have a strong sales, and they have to be working together really well, or else you're not going to be able to scale either. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that answered your question specifically. I jumped all over the place, but all of those things I think are true.
I'm gonna add one thing, and Tom, I'd like your perspective on this as well. I think that fourth thing is systems. So when we take that client that we worked on, when we figured out what the student wanted, and the key was to connect them with a person, excuse me, we created a system out of connecting students to this person and just ran it like a game plan, right? Just like over and over and over. And it became like, oh, we're getting all these people in this program. And that was for a nonprofit, but we do the same thing for sales. Once we have a methodology that works, then it's like opening the fire hose in a sense, right? We're going to run that game plan.
100% true. Yeah. And I'll double down on that too. There's a lot of people who think if in order for me to scale, this is really true of small business owners, in order for me to scale, what I need to do is replicate myself. If there were more of me's, I would be successful. That is never true. I've not found that to be true even once. And here's the problem, because if you want to replicate yourself, the chances that someone would be as good as you at what you are good at and is going to be really, really pricey. All right. So I can do one of two things, right? It's better for me. I can try to replicate myself. The better thing for me to do is to say, where am I actually weak and where I can bolster some of what I'm actually trying to accomplish. But even better, what are some of the things that I'm good at that can be automated and be turned into a game plan? Because I'm good at these 4 things, and then if I come up with processes for these 5 things, I don't need to replicate myself. I just need to train someone how to do these 5 things and then pay them what I need to pay them, and I can scale much faster that way. So that's one thing I think with small business owners that they get wrong a lot, is just kind of like, well, I don't trust anybody, so I just need to create more of me. No, that's not going to work.
Tom, I'm sure you got thoughts on that, because a lot of times we're trying to get the key person in a business who sells like crazy. Might even be a $20 or $30 million company, right? And they sell all this stuff, and then they go to sell their company, and it's hard to sell the company because it's all tied to that one person.
It's them.
And Tom has to come in here and figure it out.
Alex, you and I know those people. We work with those people, but it's interesting what you said, Jay, and this is kind of a little bit of the funnel. I like to give people frameworks to think about. Is you eliminate, you automate, and you delegate, right? And if you, in that order, and that hopefully then leaves you with the thing that truly makes you unique, which hopefully is significantly less than what you're currently doing. And then you have an opportunity to scale. Now, while I have the mic here, I have a side question to ask you. I want to ask everybody, by the way, when we do this, but what is the difference, or maybe there is none, between scaling and growing?
Oh, interesting. There's nuances between the two that are important to understand. I would say that part of scaling is making sure that you have the capacity to do it, as opposed to growing, which could be like, so for example, I have a client right now who's doing awesome. They're doing really, really, really well. They're not far enough along yet where I've introduced them to Ninestone, so Ninestone doesn't work. But I've actually told them, like, hey, look, you're going to need a sales closer soon. And I know a really good one, and his name is Tom, right? They would not have the capacity to scale right now, but they are growing like crazy. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the easiest analogy and the easiest way to explain it is hockey stick growth, right? So hockey stick growth is only empowered if you have the ability to scale. If you don't have the ability to scale, so let me just put it this way: if you have a sales team of one, and that person can close 5 deals a month, the question that you have to ask yourself is this: would the rest of my team be ready if I hired 3 more salespeople and started closing 15 deals a month, right? So if you said to me, yes, the team is ready to scale to that degree, but I'm not adding another salesperson, then I would tell you, okay, you're still growing, but you're not trying to scale. Because scaling would mean I am preparing myself to be able to do this at a greater sustained level in the future, right? So you should always be growing in some area, right? Maybe not new customers, but maybe it's the new product features that you're adding before you actually hit the marketplace or something, because you're trying to find product market fit. So growth is something that I would say your business should always be doing. But scaling requires you to think strategically about what is it that I need to do to understand the plateaus that I would hit as I scale and address those plateaus as I come across them. But I don't know. What's your answer to that question, Tom?
I'm going to piggyback off your example of hiring more salespeople. Again, that's my background. So if I have one salesperson that's doing 5 and I hire another 3, if I rearrange them organizationally, I might be able to get 20. Because now maybe I have somebody that's focused on managing those salespeople and being able to aggregate some of those tasks that each person has to do. I don't know if you're familiar with this idea of creating an architecture of a building where you do what's called an affinity or adjacency study. And basically it says something like, okay, we're going to get this building. And the first question I'm going to ask is, who needs a bathroom? If I did it without thinking about affinity adjacency, every single cubicle would have a toilet, right? Because everyone needs one, right? And so I don't know if anybody has figured this out, but that's the reason bathrooms are in the middle of the building, right? So there's this idea of adjacency and affinity. So I take the commonality and I'm able to, maybe have 2 or 3 stalls for the entire floor. It's very similar when it comes down to sales. What are the common tasks? And that's what I'm saying, that moves you from growing, having 3 or 4 salespeople doing 5 apiece, taking 3 people, scaling, and getting 20 out of that group.
Yeah. It's well said. I like that.
I'm going to think about bathrooms differently when I'm when I'm in big buildings. But I like this idea for sure, Tom, because a lot of that, so it's not only people and organization, but then we come back to your technology piece, Jay, that you mentioned, where what can we automate? And that's really where tools like HubSpot or Salesforce enable us to do things where maybe we could do it with 10 leads a month, and now we could do it with 1,000 or 10,000.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Where we're running campaigns where one person, I could tell you, gosh, before marketing automation, quote unquote, right, it took dozens of people to run the type of stuff that we can now run with a fraction of one person.
That's correct.
Right? We're running hundreds of campaigns for clients, for one client, let's say, across 500,000 different contacts for 5 different divisions, and that takes 25% of one person right, to run it all.
Awesome.
It's crazy. So that, I think, is scale. I love how you talked about growth. Before we jump, I definitely want to ask you, tell us a little bit about the projects you're working on and the awards that you've recently won, and how that you feel that's related to the work you do as a fractional CMO, because it's just been super cool.
Yeah, so I have multiple hats that I wear, like you said, but the 2 main ones are I do fractional CMO work, mostly for startups, but for small businesses too. And that's just people will come to me. The client recently came to me and they said, we are currently at 4 million in yearly recurring revenue. We want to grow to 10 million, right? Oh, look, okay, that's a great question. That's a really good reason to bring on a fractional CMO, right? So let's talk about the things that you have in place that are good, the things you have in place that are probably need to be improved, the things that in order to scale, to Tom's earlier question, it's not like we're going to hire 10 new people, right? We got to be able to scale this, but without hiring anybody else. And so that's one client, fantastic client that I have. Another client that I have came to me, really interesting case study because they're a nonprofit doing a super advanced technology in the healthcare industry. And I'm like pretty much cutting edge. It was cutting edge as you can get there. And they're essentially like, okay, we need you. We don't know how to get our first customer. We've been doing this for a long time. We don't know how to do it. And I go, okay, cool. I know how to do that. Right? Like I know how to get your first customer. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be harder than you think it is. But I can help you get there. And we're going to close one by the end of the year, which is awesome. So I have other clients that are completely transforming their business model. They're going from, we used to do this, but now we're going to do this instead. And that's a super heavy lift. That's a 10 out of 10 difficulty type of lift. Because what has made you successful in the past is likely to prevent you from being successful in the future, actually. And so you need to learn two things. Not only what does the customer want and how do I react to it, but also how do I stop doing the things that the customer doesn't want and that are actually preventing me from gaining business. So that's a really heavy lift. Talk about that being, that's a tough one. But I also have this, I also have filmmaking that I do, right? And so we just released a film last year. It's been on the festival circuit. It's been winning awards on the festival circuit, which has been fantastic. I was the co-writer and co-director of that film.
What's the film?
The film is called No Vacancy. It's not out on YouTube yet because on the festival circuit, you know, they want it to be exclusive, so they don't let you like just put it on YouTube. But it should be by the end of the year or early next year at the latest. It should be on YouTube for everybody to watch. And it's sort of like I like to describe it as like a superhero thriller. It's like you're watching a David Fincher film, but it has some superhero kind of characters to it. And I've been learning a lot about that process. What's really interesting is that whether it's filmmaking or whether it's marketing, what you're trying to present to people are ideas about how they might want to rethink how life works, how they think about things, how they feel about things. And that is not an easy process to understand. It requires work to understand who your customer is. Just I keep bringing up the Steve Blank book, but it requires work to understand how your customer feels about a thing, how they think about a thing, why they might change their behavior about a thing. Well, filmmaking is not that much different because when you're creating a film, you're saying, well, how does the world work? Because the last thing you want to do, and I know that a lot of films do this, and it's frustrating, but the last thing you want to do is you don't want to become propaganda. You can become propaganda when you're in the marketing world. You can become propaganda when you're in the filmmaking world. And propaganda, in my definition of the word, is I'm going to repeat something to you that is not necessarily true, but it makes you feel a certain way and it makes you behave a certain way. So storytelling is the opposite of propaganda, which says, I'm going to tell you things that are true that will make you rethink the way that you actually think about a thing. So propaganda I can just use to, hey, you like to think and feel this way? Here's more of it. It may not be good for you. It may not change any of your behavior. You might be behaving the way that you always do. That can be, so for example, let's just take, I'll take a funny example. Ice cream can be something that has a deep storytelling aspect to it, because I could say, when I take my kids to go get ice cream, we spend time together around a table, we laugh together, we have an experience that makes us bond and love each other more. We're able to share things around the table because coming together in that kind of experience kind of allows people to loosen up and talk about things in different ways. Or I can sell ice cream to you by saying, like, don't you crave sugar? You should have some more ice cream. And then now you're eating ice cream after lunch and after dinner and after, oh, you know what? I'm going to have ice cream for breakfast. Well, now I'm delivering propaganda to you. I'm not delivering the truth of what's good for you. I'm delivering the drug that keeps you coming back for more. And so I think whether you're marketing or filmmaking, I personally can't stand propaganda, but I love storytelling. So let's try and make people's lives better and richer and fuller, and not just get them to do things that we want them to do because it makes us money.
Wow, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Gosh, that gives us a lot to think about how to approach businesses that are growing and scaling in a way that has ethics behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tom, we got time for maybe one more question. Why don't you give us a short one, and then we'll knock it out. Jay, you can tell us where folks can connect with you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, it's interesting. I want to ask a few sort of lightning round questions. I think this would be kind of fun, just to kind of start it, ending it up, and then it'll intersect a little bit of what we're going on.
Take it away.
Filmmaking and some business. So, Jay, which fictional character would crush it at your company, and in what role?
You know, one of my favorite fictional characters, and I don't think that she gets enough credit for this, The Princess and the Frog, which is a Disney movie, animated Disney movie. I think by far Tiana is my favorite princess, and specifically because Tiana is an entrepreneur. And Tiana goes about learning how to start a company, dreaming how to start a company, looking at all the distractions that could prevent her from starting a company, and is able to navigate through all of those things in terms of getting the company that she wanted. But she learns how to scale it. She learns how to go about. She tests her beignets with her friends and family. They love them. They want to buy them. By the way, they're not just telling her, and then they're not garbage beignets. They're really delicious beignets. And so I think that Tiana could show other people how to grow their company. So I would hire Tiana.
I love it. I got to go back and watch that movie again.
Excellent, Jay. Well, look, we can obviously keep going and chatting about a bunch of stuff, but hopefully our listeners out there has got a little bit of what it is to get stacked and scaled. Jay, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me, if you are a small business or a tech startup and you want to learn how to scale better. Look, there's a lot of noise out there, right? I mean, AI is the latest noise. Oh yeah, AI is so important. Great. But AI is not necessarily going to help you connect with customers and find product market fit. Okay. So there's certain things that AI just can't do yet. And maybe someday when we get super intelligence, they'll be able to do it, but they're not there yet. But if you want to learn how to, get product market fit, build your company, scale that company, the best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm easy to look up. You'll see that I'm connected to Alex. See that I'm connected to Tom. My name is not that. It's fairly unique, so it's easy to find me. So easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn, and very happy to talk to you about scaling your company, what it looks like to start a company, any of those things. It's a great place to find me. If you want to learn more about me, breaking down stories and learning how to tell better stories, which I'm very passionate about, you can go to YouTube and look at How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. Definitely not on the business side, much more on the film side. But what I'm learning as I learn about film is equally what I learn about business, which is how do I tell stories that benefit people, and how do I go about the process of learning how to do things better, right? Alex and Tom, you guys are both about this. Like, how do we do things better? You can't scale it if you're not going to do it better. So How Stories Work with Jay Sherer is me learning more about film and how to tell better stories myself.
Well, I love it, Jay. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Keep after it, buddy.
Thanks for having me on the show. Super fun times.
Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. Click here for more great content to help you scale smarter. If this episode was valuable for you, share it with a friend and drop a comment below. And when you're ready to scale, visit us at ninestonepartners.com. Until next time, keep stacking, keep scaling.